Welcome to the Leggy Sports YouTube channel. Today we're going to be talking about the paradox that is Cade Cunningham. Apparently that's his new nickname via Twitter. Naz Reid is going to reject his player option, become a free agent. How can he fit with Detroit? We're going to talk about that. And the Pistons have won 7 straight. So we have a few things to talk about. That's not the only stuff we'll talk about. There might be more that's on our plates. But first, I want to welcome in Sean Murphy, who's been a great resource for me in this content creation space. But Sean, introduce yourself, where people can find your work, anything like that.
What's going on, brother? Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I'm Sean Murphy, host of From Half Court, Pistons NBA podcast. You can find a lot of my work at From Half Court on YouTube. Leggy, you've been on the podcast a couple of times. It's always been a lot of fun having you on. And you can also find a lot of my work at Sean Half Court on Twitter. I'm a credentialed Pistons reporter. Go to games throughout the year, get to talk to players and coaches. So if you ever want to see any of that coverage, you can head to Twitter, and that's where you'll find a lot of that. And yeah, man, it's been a really good season. It's been, just all of the growth and the progress they've made. This is my second year being credentialed. So going from the 28 game losing streak year to this has been a total whirlwind, and there's been a lot of fascinating stuff that's happened in that time. So no, I'm glad to be here, and yeah, man, it's been cool to build the friendship and just cool to see what you're doing. Just keep growing. And yeah, man, happy to come on the show anytime.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I've never talked to a credentialed member of the media. Generally, it's just talking to the keyboard warriors on Twitter and about what they see in the press conference videos. But you've been in the room with the players, coaches, you've talked to them. What is the biggest difference from last year to this year? Because from the videos, I can already tell that there's a huge difference in the mentality, the mindset, how they're talking, how they're speaking. What do you see from the body language, them walking in, walking out?
Yeah, from a player standpoint, I just think there's a real clarity and understanding of what's expected of them, what their role is, what their role isn't, what the philosophy and the vision is behind the team, and like the direction they're going towards, and also just like a confidence that quite frankly just wasn't there. Just you're seeing throughout the season, just the overall, like as they're winning games, as they're learning what it takes to win in this league, the veterans that they've brought in all have a confidence and understanding of the moment that that they face, and how to meet that moment. And for the young players, you just see a level of confidence and security that the coaching staff has got their back, the players on on the bench have got their back, and that they have what it takes. And from a coaching standpoint, being able to like talk to JB Bickerstaff, and obviously contrast that to like Monty Williams last year. I think there's a level of communication and energy and enthusiasm that's there this year that just wasn't really there last season. JB, he's a guy that brings a lot of positive energy, and but also is very clear and concise and direct of what he's expecting. And so I just think the culture that has been established in this short time by JB and his staff, it really shows on the court. And the thing that was said in JB's introductory press conference was, and it's the quote that's been going, like that's been making the rounds. Question from my guy Brandon Dent, Detroit Kool-Aid. So I want to give a shout out to him. But the quote was, by come January, February, you're going to be tuning in and seeing Detroit Pistons basketball. Not only are we seeing Detroit Pistons basketball, but we've seen them match their win total of the last 2 seasons already combined. So, yeah, it's just when you talk about like the difference, quite frankly, it's night and day.
Yeah, and I mean, looking at the standings, we're 1 game behind Indiana, 1 game behind Milwaukee. We're creating space from Orlando. I think it's at 3.5. Maybe there's been some changes based on last night's games or today's games, but we're about 5 games ahead of Miami and Atlanta. So,
Yep.
I mean, that's just amazing to see from this year. I didn't think we were going to be able to do this at this point in the season. I would have thought, okay, if we're fighting for that 10 seed, that's something.
Yeah, I don't think the Pistons would have told you that they thought that they would be doing this. I mean, Trajan was asked, at the All-Star break, like, did you expect the Pistons to be, like be talking about playoffs? And he said, not at all. Like, like he thought that they could be fighting for, for play-in contention. And, like to just to, like give that perspective, the Pistons are way closer to the 4th seed than they are to the 7th seed. And, you just talk about the trajectory they're heading on. They've, I believe in their last like 28 games, they're like 19-9, or it might even be 20-8 at this point. It's some crazy number. And, I remember, a couple months ago, we were just talking about like, oh man, this team, like they could potentially end the season at 500, but at their current pace, they're projected to go over 500. I mean, Leggy, we're talking about a 40 plus win basketball team here.
Yeah, there's not been a team in history that has gone from the worst in the league to much better than what Detroit's going to be able to do. I mean,
Mhm.
we saw San Antonio do it. I made a video on this a few days ago. We saw San Antonio do it when David Robinson was hurt. They got Tim Duncan. We saw Miami go from the worst team in the league to, I believe it was 48 wins. I can't remember what it was. But Detroit's going to join an elite tier of teams that haven't been able to do that, make that jump. I mean, looking at their 3-year outlook, where do you kind of rank them compared to some of these other teams in the East? So you have Cleveland, who
Mhm.
they have Evan Mobley, they have Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell's locked up. Can they compete with them for the top of the East along with the Celtics?
Yeah, I think the Pistons with the talent that they have, but also the youth that they have, they're poised to be in the mix for the top of the Eastern Conference for years to come. And if you look at if you're to rank like really who is the most likely to be up in the top of the standings, I mean Cleveland, they have to be there because that's also a young team doing what they're doing. They have some veterans, but for the most part, their core is pretty young, so they'll stay together for a while. Boston is still fairly young too. They're going to still be contending at least for a couple more years. But outside of that, I mean, quite frankly, dude, it is wide open. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Giannis isn't on. It doesn't start next season in a Milwaukee Bucks uniform,
Oh,
just with the trajectory that the Bucks are heading in. He's talked very openly about how he wants to be somewhere that he can win. And if the Bucks head into another situation where they have another early playoff exit, I wouldn't expect, especially with trading Chris Middleton, with a lot of the, kind of the old guard of the Bucks being out. He's someone to me where I wouldn't be surprised if he wants to look at a new home. So that's something to consider. The Knicks are very good, but at the same time, they have a very specific window. It's within the next couple of years. That's a veteran basketball team. So that's not necessarily, and also James Dolan being their owner, you can't necessarily rule out, a potential collapse with the Knicks. And really the only other team, that would kind of be in that mix is the Pacers. But as good as Tyrese Halliburton has been and as solid as their, as their core is, this is a team that just made the Eastern Conference Finals. I personally don't even think it's much of a debate that Cade Cunningham's been better than Tyrese Halliburton this season.
easy.
And quite frankly, Cade is younger and has still shown areas of like ability to grow in his games. So I know this might, put some Pacers fans, I might get some angry Pacers fans in my mentions, but quite frankly, I think Cade Cunningham's a better future bet than Tyrese Halliburton at this point. So I think when you put it into that type of perspective, and yeah, there will be some other teams who will rise in the rankings, but I think we're seeing a real shift of the balance of power in the Eastern Conference, and I think the Pistons are in the mix to be at the top of it again for years to come.
Yeah, the only other team that I can think of that could rival is Orlando. We saw their
Mhm.
emergence last year. This year, it's been slow. They're fighting for that 6 seed, but I think they're going to end up in the 7, 8, 9 area. But you look at what Franz and Paolo are doing, they're looking like elite players, but they're both doing it a little bit differently, both putting up a lot of stats. I'm
Yep.
curious to see if they kind of take an approach kind of like what Detroit did and Houston did the year before and overpay for some serious veteran help. Because if you surround those two with key shooters, key playmakers, I don't know, that's a team where you have a bunch of talent. It's just not meshing together. And to a lesser extent, that's kind of what we saw from Detroit these past few years. They have a lot of young guys. They don't really have their specific role yet. They're still trying to figure it out. I
Yep.
mean, don't get me wrong, Orlando's great and they have great pieces. They already have an all-star and a potential all-star in Franz, but they're showing the same similar signs of they need different leadership in the locker room. They need different styles of play in the locker room because it's just not working.
Yeah, it's shocking what's happening with the Magic this season. I mean, with their talent and everything in house, especially like how good they were to start the season. Like Orlando seemed like a team that was poised to, quite frankly, like Orlando was supposed to be Detroit this season, or they were supposed to be, right up there in the top of the Eastern Conference standings. But the thing that's been so shocking is even when they've had Paulo and Franz back in the lineup, they've just been horrid offensively. I mean, they're 30th in the league in points per game. They're 28th in the league in offensive rating. And, like the thing that's shocking is even when those guys are on the court, they're just not getting it done. And I think they're a team that is going to have to aggressively look at changing their roster and bringing in some fresh faces, like you said. And the thing that's surprising is they already have gone out to an extent and overpaid for a veteran. They went out and got Contavious Caldwell Pope, who was supposed to really complement this lineup, bring some, some 3-point shooting and defense. And, for the most part, like he's been okay, but like honestly, it's probably been his worst season as a pro. So,
Yeah.
it's going to be interesting to see, how that develops in Orlando, because I mean, just a year ago, that looked like a very promising core that could potentially stick together for years to come. But I think, potentially, if things don't turn around there and show some signs of life to end the season, they're going to be in a position where they're going to have some pretty hard conversations and quickly, because you never know what your true window is in this league.
Yeah, I don't want to see Franz and Paulo split up, but it reminds me a little bit of the Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown thing. They kind of do similar things.
Mhm.
Boston ended up getting a championship to kind of prove the doubters wrong. Hopefully Orlando doesn't have to go through those same hard conversations, but when you're an NBA team, that comes with the territory. But the biggest difference for Detroit comparing to all of these other teams is they have Cade Cunningham.
Yep.
And on Twitter, we saw a new nickname for Cade Cunningham that just kind of popped out of nowhere. I saw somebody mention it and I looked at it. I was like, has that been around? This has like 500 likes. The Paradox.
Yeah. I've heard it. I think I've heard it mentioned before. It's an interesting nickname. I actually saw a take. I brought up Brandon Dent earlier. He retweeted this. I actually really liked this take from someone. It was at Rocastle7K on Twitter. They said, Cade is Cade. He's gonna be a one name star like Kobe, Shaq, others. And like honestly, like I kind of like that. You know what I mean? Like when you have like the one name nickname conversation, like that's a short list of players, like that's Wade, that's Kobe, that's LeBron. Like that's I think Cade has the way that he's playing and the way that he carries himself, like Cade's Cade. Like I kind of like that take, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and I mean, Motorcade was the one given to him on draft night, and I like
Yep.
that, but it's city based, it's team based.
Yeah.
And I think that's a hard thing to do, especially when you're a player. Do you want to be known by the team you're with? And of course, he might. But the thing is, I mean, these players have lives outside of their NBA team, and they have brands that they have to create outside.
Yep.
So I don't know if Motorcade fits. I think, I don't know. Cade, you're right. It's just like a one name, perfect name.
Yeah.
But I want to talk a little bit about some of his other nicknames, and I'm going to give you a little quiz real quick.
Oh
So
boy.
you have to guess which one I want to be his nickname.
Okay, I got you.
So I'm going to give you a list of these.
All right, sounds good.
So
I gotta go. I gotta go off of vibes, but also off of what I know about. I like this. Okay, let's go.
yeah, what you know about me, you might have.
Yep.
I tweeted it earlier, and then
Okay.
I was like 2 minutes in. I said I want to ask this question later, so I'm going to
Okay.
delete it.
Okay.
Okay, so there's Motorcade,
Yep.
Deuce,
Mm-hmm.
Lone Star, The
Ooh.
Paradox, and Cade Icewood.
All right. All right. All right. One more. All right. One more time. One more time. So
Yep.
we got Cade Icewood. We got the Paradox. We got Dallas. Was it Dallas Lone Star?
Just Lone Star.
Just Lone Star.
And then Deuce and Motorcade.
Okay. I'm gonna guess. I'm gonna go. You know what? I Lone Star is pretty sick. I know. I believe we've talked. I believe you have some fandom of Star Wars. So I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go with Lone Star.
So I didn't even think of the Star Wars one, but Lone Star would be my pick
Yep.
because it ties into his upbringing in
Yep.
Texas. It's
Yep.
just a perfect name for him. And I don't remember who said it. I wish I could shout him out. I'll put him in the description as well. But they made a tweet and they had a sick video of Cade walking in through the tunnel wearing all black. And I was like, holy crap, that's a perfect nickname for this
Yeah,
guy.
that nickname goes hard. I'm not gonna lie. That objectively, that goes hard.
And the funny thing about it though is, yes, he's been a lone star on this Detroit team, but like he's not a guy who's going to do it by himself. He's a guy
No,
who loves to facilitate. So it's kind of like not an oxymoron, but just not a true name. But it just sounds cool. It doesn't mean anything.
it's interesting to me that Malik Beasley, he's played, with a couple of superstars, but the superstar he compared Cade to is Nikola Jokic. And, I think there's some ground to it from the sense that he is the type of player that is a guy that elevates the pieces around him,
Yeah.
I don't think I don't think it's crazy that people compare the way that that Cade plays to the way that LeBron plays, because he really is the type of guy that, has, he's a jack of all trades, not necessarily a master at any single one of them, but he's really, really damn good in every single area. And the way that he makes his teammates better, his passing, his playmaking, the spots that he gets his teammates in, I don't think it's a coincidence that Malik's having his best year of his career with Cade Cunningham on the court. So, yeah, no, I think that's truly what makes him different over a lot of other players. Like there's a lot of guys who can go out and get theirs, but guys who can truly elevate and make those around them better are the ones that are special. And the fact that Cade's doing it this young, by the way, like he's only like 23 years old,
Yeah.
and he's looking the way that he does. So that's the crazy thing, is we're still in beginning days of what even a prime Cade Cunningham even looks like. And that's, for the league, that's terrifying.
Yeah. And my favorite thing is just seeing him with open court because
Yep.
he has the ability to pull up. He has the ability to take a mid range. He has the ability to drive in and dunk on someone like he's done on Derek White twice this
Yep.
year. Or maybe it
Yep.
was once at the end of last year, maybe twice this year. But he also has the ability to kick it out, kick it cross court, bounce pass it behind the back. I mean, he has all these different options. So he's always putting the defense on their toes. That's my
Yeah.
favorite thing.
And he just takes whatever's given to him. And the thing
Exactly.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, and the thing that, if you really want to know what a team really thinks of a player, look at how they defend him. And the thing that stood out with Cade Cunningham is, I remember I went to his first game in Detroit, his first game in the league. He was getting blitzed from his first possession in the league. So like this is a guy who, like, they everyone knew right away that this was going to be someone that was going to be a absolute handful. And, even though, like, he doesn't necessarily have his quote unquote co-star out there with him right now, Ivy was looking like he could certainly, fill that role pretty well. The fact that they're getting even better still without a major core foundational piece of what they're trying to be on the court, just, he's only stepped up his game since Ivy's gone down. And that to me is why, like, I don't think he's going to win the award, but he certainly has to be in consideration for MVP.
Yeah. Where would you put him? Like top 5?
Top 5 for sure. I think I tweeted out earlier today because, someone tweeted out some of Cade's highlights. I said second team all NBA has to be where the conversation starts.
Yeah. I mean, you look at the guards in the league. I mean, especially if you look in the East, over
Mhm.
this year, he's outperforming Trae Young.
Absolutely.
He's on the same ish tier as Brunson.
Yep.
You could make the case for Cade over Brunson. I think that's
Yeah.
pretty easy to do.
Yeah.
So, I mean, best point guard in the Eastern Conference, but then you have to look at the West, who all's out there. I mean, second team minimum.
Yeah.
I don't think he's going to get any first team love unless they somehow jump to the 3 or 2, because then there's a narrative driven approach from
Yep.
Detroit going from last to third.
Yep.
But yeah, I think second team is a really good point there.
Yeah, I think the only lock on first team all NBA right now at the guard spot is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He's probably the lock to win MVP as well. But outside of that, I think it's totally open. Like, I think I wouldn't be surprised if on first team you had Anthony Edwards or Cade Cunningham. But quite frankly, if you look at the supporting cast that they have and what they're asked to do, I think that's Cade Cunningham, in my personal opinion. Also, I just think Cade's straight up having a better year. than
Yeah.
Anthony Edwards right now.
I think
So
he's down 2 points and up 4 assists.
Mhm. And so it's really it's Anthony Edwards, it's Jalen Brunson in that conversation with Cade, but in my personal opinion, I if they continue to go on this pace, if the Pistons have a 40 plus win season, like I really think Cade Cunningham first team All NBA is not out of the question. But at the minimum, second team All NBA should be really where the conversation starts. And the fact that that's even a conversation, by the way, is just hats off and kudos to like Cade Cunningham, like that, like to rise that quickly in the rankings
Mhm.
is truly something we don't see very often.
Uh, if last year Troy Weaver put a competent team around Cade Cunningham, he got him veterans, and obviously there's no one-to-one match for who they got this year. What kind of season could he have had if they put a proper coach around him? If they put some shooters around him? If they didn't have the veterans be Bojan and Alec Burks laughing after they get blown out game after game? I
Yeah,
mean, what could he have done?
yeah, I certainly think that obviously the team did him absolutely no favors with the roster that was put around him and the acquisitions that were made. I don't know if he has fully a season like this. I think something that's important to remember is he was coming back off of off of missing, pretty much the majority of the season before. So I still think you would have seen, some cobwebs being shaken off. But I mean, the fact that Cade was, he was playing really good basketball even during, some of that losing streak and throughout a lot of that season. Like, I think if there's anyone that was tuning into Pistons games, sickos like us who were still, watching through a lot of those dark days, I think the thing that was obvious was Cade Cunningham could still go get his, and the amount of assists that were being left, out there on the court were a pretty substantial number. So, I think we've seen this season already. If you just put some legitimate professional NBA players alongside him, it's amazing how far he can take that. So I definitely think that if he would have had this type of support last season, I don't necessarily think we would have been talking about a first time All-Star appearance. I definitely think that could have been possible, but I still think the cobwebs and some of that would have still been there just because of some of the things that he was coming off of. So I think one thing that's really like stood out about Cade this year, on top of a lot of the, obviously the confidence, just the way that he's playing. One thing that's really, I think, allowed him to do that is his conditioning. Like
Mhm.
he is just the his level of conditioning this season. He talked about, how that's something that he was really focusing on. And you can see it because he's going out and he's playing like 35 plus minutes a night and consistently. Like it's not just having good performances here and there if you're there, like here and there anymore. Like he is playing good basketball every single night. In fact, he hasn't had a game where he scored like less than 20 since like the beginning of January. So like that's what we're talking about with Cade right now. Like we like good players do it night like here and there. The great ones do it every night. And that's where Cade's getting.
Yeah, and superstars get their nicknames locked in. So the paradox, are you for? Are you against?
Oh, get the paradox out of town. Like I think that's a terrible nickname. Like I'm sorry, whoever came up with it. I like I understand the premise. I think it's cool. Like but at the same time, to me with someone like a Cade Cunningham, we got to do a little bit better than the paradox.
Yeah, the Celtics have a I don't even know who it is, but they're the anomaly. So somebody tweeted out the anomaly versus the paradox is tomorrow. But when you talk about paradox, it doesn't make sense for Cade Cunningham. It's generally it's a cool name. It sounds cool. The paradox.
Yep.
I love saying it. But it's
Yeah.
usually if their playing style, their skills, if they like defy the conventional expectations of what they're supposed
Yeah.
to be. And
Yep.
the player that I want to talk about that does defy those expectations is Naz Reid. He's a 6'9", 6'10" player who plays like a guard.
Yeah, that's a paradox.
That would be the paradox. So hopefully we can push that. We can call him the paradox. He hears that and says, you know what? Those Detroit fans are pretty cool. But
Yeah.
he's reportedly opting out of his $15 million contract.
Hmm.
Over his past 10, 21.5 points per game, 10 rebounds a game, 3.5 assists per game, 2 blocks a game. So he's showing he can be a legit number one, number two on a team. And I can just imagine the fit next to Jalen Duren, a floor spacer that can play inside. He can play defense. I mean, there was a clip I watched yesterday. He had a off the backboard block into a post fade on the other end, and then a few possessions later, a crossover three. So, can you just talk to me about how you could kind of see Naz Reid fitting, maybe what you could see his contract being, and I mean, a big thing this team has is the culture, how he might be able to fit in the culture. That's a lot to ask of you right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, Naz Reid is a guy that fits on all 30 teams. He is like when you talk about his level of production, his level of energy, like just known as a high character guy, but he's already someone that's had big playoff moments on both sides of the court. And he's someone again that just he does whatever's asked of him. And the fact that he can do pretty much any of it is pretty impressive. But the stuff that's been really, like that's really stood out this year is just some of the self-creation stuff and just how much he's really coming into his own, like as an offensive player. Like this is someone who's shooting 40% from three on almost 6 attempts per game. And he's a big man who's a really good rim protector. And you talk about like, like JB Bickerstaff playing, like he had like a two big lineup, in Cleveland, to be able to kind of like replicate that with like with like a Duren and a Naz Reid would certainly be really appealing, in my opinion. If you are to go out and try to get like a big fish, that's a pretty damn good fish to go and get. So I certainly think that that's someone that the Pistons would have interest in. But at the same time, I think that's someone that a lot of teams are going to have
Exactly.
interest in. So if Detroit would bring him in, they would certainly have to, like they would certainly like have to pay like a pretty penny for him. Like right now, he's making about, I mean, like this season, he's making like just under $13 million. So I wouldn't be surprised if he was in a position to double his salary this offseason. But on the flip side, like Detroit, like they have some extension conversations and decisions to make themselves with Jaden Ivey, with Jalen Duren. They still have, obviously like next season, you're going to have the Asar Thompson conversation. So like Detroit's going to have a lot of things that they're going to have to figure out as far as that goes too. But having said that, if you're talking about like who is a player that's worth going out and making that type of risk for, it's known commodities like Naz Reid, who even if he's never technically an all-star, is someone who is showing can be an all-star caliber player. And quite frankly, like those are the types of players that win you basketball games. Now, I think one team that Naz Reid's going to be linked with pretty heavily as well, because he would fit their needs and is someone that that would be really a good fit on this team as well, is the Los Angeles Lakers. And if we're being honest, that's a very prominent free agency destination. I'm not sure what their salary cap situation looks like and what they can necessarily afford to pay him. But I think when you talk about what the market is going to look like for Naz Reid this summer, it's going to be a very active one. So if Detroit were to be in it, they would probably have to pay a premium for his services. But if there's anyone to make that bet for, to me, a Naz Reid would be a perfect fit just because of his willingness to play, on both sides of the court, but also just skills he's had and the continual growth that he's shown. And quite frankly, like I didn't realize how young he was. He's 25 years old. He's someone that you can build around with for a while. So to me, I think that's someone that makes a lot of sense. And I definitely wouldn't be surprised if we heard reports that Detroit had interest, because that's a pretty darn good player to bring in.
Yeah, a lot, like you said, a lot of players are going to have interest, and I'm pretty sure there has been podcasts or episodes for all 30 teams saying, you know what, Naz Reid would fit really well here. Let's pay him the pretty penny.
He is the epitome of what you want out of a modern day big, to protect the rim, to stretch the floor, to do everything that he can on both sides of the court. Like he is literally the quintessential blueprint, like the blueprint of the modern day big. It should just say Naz Reid.
Yeah, and we talked on your show a couple weeks ago, last week, talking about the future of the four position for the Detroit Pistons, and I was talking about, so Tobias Harris is great. How long is he going to last? Who could fit in there? I mean, I thought about that today, and I said Naz Reid is the perfect fit. But like I said, he's a perfect fit for a lot of teams. A lot of teams are going to be able to pay up for him, and it's not about how much you can pay. It's about if he wants to play with you, if he wants to go to your team. And I mean, if you look at the opportunity he'd have, Just look at what Tobias Harris is doing. Look at what Malik Beasley, Tim Hardaway, they're getting the opportunity because the players around them aren't selfish. You see the Asar Thompson, you see the Cade Cunningham, you see the Jalen Duren all being able to dish the ball, all able to pass it, and able to find the guys where they want it. So if I'm a Naz Reid, if I'm a player of that caliber, I just see the fit in Detroit because how can it not fit? How can it not work when you have players that are unselfish with the basketball?
And I will say, Naz Reid kind of reminds me of the way that he plays basketball. There's some shades of Rasheed Wallace there. And, like that certainly makes a lot of sense. And also, like, quite frankly, like Cade Cunningham's a guy that players are going to want to play with.
Exactly.
And like when you talk about how do you enter the free agency conversations, it starts with having a building block that players have interest in playing with. Because like obviously, of course, players want to live in the best market that they can. They want to live in warm weather, but ultimately there's two things that drive where players go. It's money, and it's where they can get a good role and win games. I think that certainly could be Detroit if that's something that Naz Reid would be interested in. So I think certainly from the sounds of it, it sounds like he is looking to get paid this summer, which he absolutely should. Like that's like he is someone that is going to be a prominent, very good NBA player for a long time. But I certainly think there's going to be some situations that he could really be a key contributor to some winning as well. And I think Detroit certainly fits that bill. I mean, if Naz Reid and Jalen Duren are your front court of the future, that immediately enters the chat as one of the best front courts in the league. And quite frankly, watching Evan Mobley and Jared Allen versus Naz Reid and Jalen Duren, get out the popcorn. Like that is about as good of a matchup as you're going to get of two rival division teams for years to come.
Yeah, think about Indiana as well. I mean,
Yeah.
you have Siakam and Miles Turner, and I don't know the future of Miles Turner. That's been a little bit murky. He's been in trade rumors for the past 10 years.
Yep.
That calmed down, and now I heard that he wanted to trade potentially at this deadline to get a bigger contract.
Yeah.
But either way,
he's someone that would have fit really well in Detroit if it weren't for the Lego comments with him and Beef Stew.
That'd never be able to work at this point.
Could you imagine their teammates and then whoever the social team is, they get those guys to build Legos together? Like that, I would pay good money to see those two build Legos together.
I just want to see this team finish out the year well.
Yeah.
And we talked about it earlier. It could collapse.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we have Boston and then Denver up after that. Do you expect anything crazy to happen during those two games? What do you kind of expect from this team coming off a 7-game win streak? And mind you, a lot of those wins were against not great teams. You have two Chicagos, you have a Charlotte, you have a Clippers without Kawhi, without Norman Powell.
Without the great Ben Simmons.
The great Ben Simmons. I'm on Ben Simmons Island, baby. Always been, won't leave. I sent the boat away a long time ago.
I mean, you probably got to have a lot bigger of a backyard now. No, but I think the next month is going to tell us a lot about where this team is actually at, because you're like you said, they went out and took care of business against teams that they were supposed to beat, right? They had the Bulls twice. They had the 76ers in town. It was the Hornets. It was the Spurs after the Wemby news. Like it was a lot of teams who quite frankly are just not at the in the upper echelon of the league. But if you remember, this 7-game winning streak started right after they lost a very narrow game to the Cleveland Cavaliers, right? So to me, the thing that will be interesting to me is just, even if the Pistons lose these games, it's how competitive are they? Because the last time they played Denver and Boston was in December. They lost to both of those teams respectively by double digits. If they can go out and even if it's like a Cleveland game where it's within a couple of points, I think that's going to be, really telling. And, even look beyond Boston and Denver, like the Pistons, they still have Oklahoma City twice. They still have Milwaukee twice. They have a potential playoff preview matchup against New York Knicks still. So even though, like, if you look relatively speaking, their strength of schedule isn't necessarily super hard compared to some other teams, but like they face Minnesota as well in Minnesota. So like you just look at their schedule overall, like they play a lot of playoff caliber teams. So not to say that like, oh, if they lose these games then this team is a fraud, but like I think we're about to see just how ready this team is going to be for playoff basketball. And for me, it's like, the fact that we're even talking about like, can this team win a playoff series, is a great, like is truly like a testament to like what they've built. But on the flip side, like to me, it just starts with win a playoff game, man. Like it's been since 2008, 2009. Win a playoff game and go from there.
Yeah, I don't want to also put down Brooklyn and Washington. And a lot of people are saying that those are easy wins. Take care of those. Washington just got Chris Middleton, Marcus Smart, other veterans. They're putting it together. You see Brooklyn, Trenton Watford has actually been a player I've loved to watch recently. Whenever he's played for them, I think they're, what is it, like 19-10, something crazy with Trenton Watford
I heard
on
they
the
got a
court.
new point guard as well.
Oh, my guy, Killian Hayes. Oh, I'm hoping that works out for him. I mean,
Yep.
the hate for him was, a lot of people would say warranted. I don't think warranted, but it's good to see him on the court again. I think you don't want to go out like that.
Right. Well, and he's someone that was well loved in Detroit. Like like the Pistons. I think quite frankly, like some of the fault does kind of belong on their end as well. Of like Monty, like was the one that was like, hey, I want to keep him, like give him another year, and like Detroit could have kind of let him have a little bit more of a smooth breakup at some point. But I think that he's someone that, from he was miscast in his role. He never should have been, like a franchise point guard. That's just not who Killian Hayes is. So to me, it's like if he can go out and put some good tape out there and show, like, because there are certainly a lot of traits where he is more than capable of having a spot in the NBA for years to come. But it's really just piecing some of those things together. But like to your point, they're still NBA teams and you still have to take care of business. And even though the organizations are probably not looking to win many games down the stretch, I know they're going to want to put some W's on, on the board, because I mean, we were in that position last season. You want to like get whatever that you can get. So for the Pistons, especially as you kind of get into the dog days of the NBA season, as you kind of get into the kind of the lull of really the fatigue starting to set in. Like it's going to tell us a lot of, all right, like time to take care of business. What can this team do? And quite frankly, I mean, it's only been getting better as the season's gone on. So
Yeah,
I don't necessarily see it slowing down, bar injuries or anything like that.
yeah, and that's where the young legs I think are going to help,
Mm-hmm.
because when you do have 10-year, 15-year veterans, they're going to slow down. We might see a little bit of a lull from Tobias Harris, Malik Beasley, Tim Hardaway Jr. They've been playing at such high levels. How much more tread do they have for the rest of the year? I hope Ron Holland can take a step. Hope Bobby Klintman can get some minutes at some point.
Yep.
My handle on Twitter is peak Bobby Klintman Stan or something, like, I can't remember what it is, but I'm huge on him. I love watching him in summer league. But hopefully you can come on again soon. We can kind of discuss what we've seen from the Pistons, and if we're still talking about 6 seed, if we're talking about 5 or 4 seed, that's great. I just hope we're not talking about, oh, hopefully we're able to hold on to the 7th seed.
Yeah.
But yeah, can you just talk about what you do, where people can find you, the kind of stuff you make? Because I'm sure a lot of my fans would love to see the stuff you're doing as well.
I appreciate it, man. Yeah. So from Half Court, it's a weekly podcast where we talk all things Pistons, but also dive deep into NBA basketball as well. Really do focus mainly, on the Pistons, and that is the team that I do cover. So get to go to, like I said, kind of earlier in the pod, get to go to some games, cover in person, bring some of those perspectives. So if you like the content, be sure to go over to From Half Court and subscribe there. That's where you'll find the bulk of my work, but you can also, again, go to Sean Half Court on Twitter. But dude, again, thanks for having me on, brother.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we're going to be talking about more Pistons content in the upcoming days, doing game breakdowns, breaking down film, talking about everything. So make sure you join us here on the Leggy Sports YouTube channel. Thank you. Have a great night.